necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Greetings and welcome to the Morningstar Report. We in this country, in this generation, are by destiny, rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. For as was written long ago, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Those were the words to be of John F. Kennedy, had he been allowed to speak at the Dallas Trade Mart on November 22nd, 1963. And we have taken up that mantle and that destiny. We are the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. And we are watching the battle between freedom and slavery unfolding before our eyes. Host Robert Morningstar, and I'd like to give you a little bit of news. Of course, the big news right now across the land is the declaration of Roe versus Wade as being unconstitutional. It's been in place since 1973. It's a strange coincidence that Roe versus Wade, the abortion bill, was passed on the day that Lyndon Johnson died. I think that's very telling. As that bill was being passed, the Lord, who watches the city, aborted Lyndon Johnson from this planet. But the evil that he did has lingered on, and hopefully part of it is being washed away. So rioting across the land, this has been a very disturbing night. Churches have been attacked, pastors have been beaten by goon squads in Seattle. Antifa is out on the street, dressed in black, with armor and Nazi helmets. And it's quite a scene that's unfolding. In South Carolina, the police stopped a street demonstration with zany, out of their mind, Democrats, I call them, calling for more abortion. I'd like to point you in the direction of my newsletter called the Morningstar Report newsletter that I've been publishing since President Kennedy's birthday on May 29th of this year. Decided to initiate it by posting and publishing the speech that he was preempted from giving. And as you recall, on that day, I recited the speech here on the program. Well, the newsletter is going very well. People are signing on at about 10 to 15 new subscribers a day. But I have a very important one that I want to bring to your attention. It's called A New Kind of Evil. And it deals with the collusion of the Catholic Church with the Chinese Communist Party in endorsing Chinese Catholicism and covering up the heinous, diabolical organ harvesting industry that is being run in China with the participation of Ukraine and Israel. Those three countries are the butcher shop of the world where you can go and get organs, human organs. So I've been aware of this for many, many years. I brought it to public attention, national attention here in the United States by working the story up to Fox News, and then it went to the National Review. I went to an exhibition of bodies, taxidermed human bodies here in New York. It was called Bodies, the Exhibition. And I was shocked by what I saw. And the most shocking thing was all the specimens were young and healthy people. And I've told you the story about how a skeleton was hanging from the ceiling, and it called to me. And when I went over to walk to it, the managers and the custodians of the bodies, the exhibition, were saying, please don't touch the specimens, please don't get too close to the cases and things like that. So, but this skeleton kept calling me over. I felt like I'd seen him before. So when I saw that none of the custodians were watching, I walked over to the skeleton that was suspended from the ceiling, hanging in the air, with his arms at his side, as if he was carrying, I'll tell you quite plainly, as if he were carrying 2 shopping bags. So I went over and I took his hand and I held it for a few minutes. And one of the things that I practice besides remote viewing is psychometry, which is being able to touch an object and receive information, sometimes about the owner or sometimes about the history. So I held the skeleton's hand, and the skeleton said to me, ask them who I am. Ask them how I died. Ask them why I'm here. Then I let go of the skeleton's hand and walked over to a custodian. And I said to him, by the way, who are these people? And he got very nervous and he said, well, we don't know who they are. I said, what do you mean? How did they die? How did they wind up in this exhibition? And he got more nervous and reticent. He says, well, we really don't know who they are. They were donated by the Chinese government to a German taxidermist who asked to put this exhibition together. And they're bodies of people who died unknown causes, and the family never reclaimed the bodies, so we don't know who they are. So I went back to that exhibition another time because I felt something was very wrong in that place. I also felt that it was an act of global terrorism, psychological terrorism, that the Chinese government was calling in people from all around the world, because this is not just one exhibition. This was the exhibition in New York. But I knew that there was an exhibition in Washington, one in Los Angeles, another one in San Francisco, several of them, of course, across Europe, since it had started in Germany. And I saw this as a vast psychological operation to inculcate fear and horror, dread, and in a sense, a warning of the shape of things to come. So I wrote to a Canadian friend of mine who was a foreign service officer, a diplomat, and who'd been in Hong Kong for many years. And he had been warning the Canadian government of the infiltration of Red Chinese spies into Canada via Hong Kong, via Vancouver, via business visas, which were being bandied about indiscriminately. And in return for writing the report, which he called the Sidewinder Report, he was sacked by the Canadian Foreign Service and blacklisted. So he and I and a British author named Gordon Thomas, who wrote a book called Seeds of Fire, we started working together. Gordon in London, my friend Brian in British Columbia, and I here in New York. And we were able to get my report to the Epoch Times in Taiwan. Epoch Times sent agents into China, and they located several prisons that were built right next to hospitals. And these were the prisons where the Falun Gong sect had been taken. Members, they were being rounded up and arrested and imprisoned without trial. And shortly thereafter, we found out that they were being suicided. They were telling the families that the person committed suicide by jumping off the building or hanged themselves, like Jeffrey Epstein, hanging themselves with no rope. But the thing that bothered me most about the second time is I went and inspected these bodies, and I found one with a bullet hole in the cheek. And that convinced me that these were all murder victims. So the story was sent to Taiwan and the Epoch Times, and they went and found the hospitals. And this has burgeoned into a mega billion-dollar industry. It is estimated now that 80,000 to 100,000 people in China are being vivisected. They're not just killed, they're sedated and their organs are taken out of them while they are alive. One of the most gruesome displays, which I described a couple of weeks ago when I went to see the bodies, was I saw from across the room a vat, a tall, well, like a fish tank, standing up vertically. It was full of fluid, and inside was what I could describe as a red sponge man. I walked up to it and realized that what I was looking at was the entire cardiovascular system of veins and arteries and capillaries of a human body. And they were all red. The whole thing was red. That's why I call him the red sponge man. And I grew very curious as to what and how this thing had been formed. And when I read the description, it said that a certain kind of plastic, liquid plastic, had been infused into this body through the aorta and pumped through the body till the red plastic fluid filled every vein, every artery, every capillary, from the toes and the feet all the way to the head and the brain. And then the flesh and the bones were dissolved, leaving only that specimen after the plastic had been hardened. And I said, my God, this is diabolical. The only way that this could have been done is to have pumped this fluid into a living human being while he was still alive. So you use the fresh blood to ride the blood and ride the pumping of the heart through the body in a couple of minutes, and then watching it harden. So this is the kind of diabolical, murderous regime that rules China today. And it is the kind of terrorism that keeps the people mute. But we are the watchmen on the walls of world freedom, and we have not been muted. And so I speak to you today about this horrible crime that's going on every day. There are 2 million Uyghurs. The correct pronunciation is Uyghurs. I know because I heard an Uyghur say it on French television. The Uyghurs are being decimated. 2 million of them are in concentration camps in Xinjiang, meaning the new provinces which border on Tibet. And every day, both Uyghurs and Falun Gong people are being murdered in huge numbers to extract their organs. Now, how does this bear on our national situation here? Another aspect of this heinous genocide is the abortion industry and stem cell harvesting and organ harvesting from infants, as well as blood. We all know the terrible stories about the satanic cult needing to drink adrenochrome. These are the real vampires on the planet. And it's been my view that a big part, big money in abortion is not just the fee that is paid by the person with childbearing person to the abortionist, but the profits that are being reaped by the selling of the parts of these unborn children, these murdered children. But they pushed too far. They went too far. I was reading Thomas Sowell's, who is a very well-known African-American writer and great thinker. And he said, when you've gotten 90% of what you want, you should be cautious about demanding the other 10%. Well, the other 10% is the extreme, and the abortion industry in America and their acolytes, their advocates, went too far when they started passing laws in California and Maryland, allowing for the infanticide of a child up to 28 days after he was born. Yes, folks, you may not have heard it, but Maryland and California passed a bill that if a baby died within 28 days of its birth, no investigation, no police inquiry would be made. They would just remain mute. But as I say, we are not mute, and we must speak. So I point you to Substack.com. The Morningstar newsletter, you can find it by typing in robertmorningstar.substack.com, and you will find an article called A New Kind of Evil. If you'd like to be on the mailing list for it, you can write to me at robertmorningstar@proton.me. robertmorningstar@proton.me. Okay, enough with these grim news, but they are essential, because if you don't know what's going on around you, I have a saying, something wicked this way comes. It comes from the title of a book and later a film. Something wicked this way comes. And it will come unless we stop it. So we must take up our cause, which is the cause of life. We are facing a global death cult. They revel in death. That's the only time they feel spiritual after a mass killing, that this weird street ritual starts with cards and crying in the street and lighting candles to the dead. And that's why I call the Democrat Party a death cult around the world. Liberals in Canada, Green Party in Europe, any number. But under the skin, they are all Marxist, Leninist, atheist, communist, Satanists. Now, big things are happening on Earth, and big things are happening across the solar system. We just had another flyby of one of our satellites going very close to Mercury. And but the subject today is going to be Mars. I'm very pleased and happy to talk about Mars, because it seems to be a very quiet place, although I'm not so sure how quiet it is underground. But last night I was on Richard Hoagland's show and made some comments on Chinese space research, as some of my colleagues on the Mars imaging team were showing their wares, their discoveries. And today I have as my special guest a person who's become my friend on Facebook. We met each other and saw each other for the first time a couple of days ago, because I invited Andrew Lane to come on the program to discuss his research and his discoveries on the planet Mars. Andrew Lane was born in Dusseldorf, Germany, and grew up in Connecticut. In the 1980s, he graduated from the University of Virginia with a business degree. Having had an interest in the mystical from an early age, Andrew became a Reiki master in the early 90s, while completing several consciousness expansion programs at the Monroe Institute. That's very interesting, because I'm an adherent of Robert A. Monroe, and I am currently teaching a course in remote viewing on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. I'll give you more information on that a bit later. This is a very interesting coincidence. Robert Monroe developed a technique for developing the ability to have out-of-body experiences, which nowadays we call remote viewing. Now, in the year 2000, Andrew Lane became a certified yoga teacher, and along with his wife, operated several yoga and dance studios over the next 18 years. In early 2021, Andrew discovered an online community dedicated to discovering anomalies within NASA Mars images. Today, he runs Mars Revealed, a Facebook group focused on collecting fascinating Martian finds from both the Curiosity and the Perseverance rovers. So, Andrew Lane, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Oh, great to see you. Great to see you.
Thanks, Robert. It's
yes.
it's great to be on the program.
Well, I'm honored to have you. As I told the audience, I've been on Facebook, I guess, since 2005 or 2007. I've had my roller coaster rides. They've closed my account several times. Got around that by opening another account. I'm still struggling to get my original account back because it had 10,000 people that were following our work. But Andrew Lane is one of those people who signed on to my new page, and I was amazed at his work. He has a remarkable eye, and he's very dedicated to researching Mars, and he's found all kinds of artifacts. So today we're going to take a little trip to Mars and discuss what he and I have been researching for quite a long time. Now, Andrew, you told me that you turned to Mars because of the lockdown. You want to tell us a bit about how that came about? We all had to do something to survive, and I think you found a very good avenue for your interest, and self-preservation is actually what we were doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you get a little closer to the mic?
Yeah, how's that?
That's a bit better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically the lockdown happened and it was very clear that I needed to disconnect from mainstream media. And I did that along with my wife and started doing a pretty consistent meditation practice for about a year for the first time. And I had been involved in yoga for many years, but never really was able to get the meditation aspect to stick. So that finally happened, and I just felt like there was much more synchronicity happening in my life, much more, much more connectedness to a lot of things. And by chance, that's when Perseverance was landing on Mars. And I had been listening to Richard Hoagland's show, and I think through that, I heard about that, went to his page on Facebook and saw some of the first images from Perseverance. And that was around January, February of 2021. And I was looking at one of the images and something looked odd to me. And I'd heard that there were some things that had come through the previous rovers, but I had never followed up on it. But anyway, to make a long story short, I checked something out. It looked very odd. And then as a result of that, I found these other Facebook groups that were deeply and had been deeply involved in the Martian anomaly business, if you want to call it that, for as much as 10 years. And I connected with a lot of them, just tremendous people, tremendous groups, and just started looking at some of the older images and going through them and finding a lot of stuff right away. And I needed a place to house them, so I created the group and started doing that, and accepted some submissions from other people. But it felt very synchronistic. It felt like there was some reason for me to be doing it. I was finding a lot of stuff fairly quickly. At least I thought it was all very interesting.
Well, I was very impressed. I would go to Facebook, and there'd be I quite by mistake I clicked turn on Messenger, and I actually opened my Proton account so I would have fewer emails, but inadvertently I pressed okay, turn on Messenger and load Messenger, and all of a sudden Facebook just fills up every page. Right. And your emails or your messages were there, and I would go and I'd see the picture, and I said, this man has remarkable eyes. He sees things other people can't see. He's finding them one right after another. So I started corresponding with you and saying, hey, Andrew, that's a great discovery, a fantastic find. So maybe we'll get a chance to see some of them, you and I. People who are listening, of course, will have to use their imaginations. Yeah, but we are recording the program in video, and so it may be accessible. I'm making it available to contributors to the program, those of you who contribute a donation to help the Morningstar Report keep going can receive videos of our interviews. But Andrew was impressing me because he kept finding artifacts, you know, not just rocks. He would find cylinders with bas reliefs and etchings and carvings and all kinds of really anomalous things. I mean, they're out of the natural. And those are some of the things that we focus on in the Mars imaging team. I put up a picture this afternoon in the Facebook ad or notice that we would have the show of what turns out to be, it looks like a satellite dish or a solar panel folded over the hull of a ship that's listed and on its side on a Martian mountaintop. And that's just one example of the anomalies. Another picture that I posted is called the Martian Road. It's almost like the yellow brick road. It's more pink, but Martian Road on Lambert Field on Mars. And as time has gone by, NASA's become more honest in what they released. You know, for years, NASA wanted us to believe that Mars was a dead, dusty, rust-covered planet with a red sky. And I kept telling people, no, it's not true. Mars is a living planet. It's got weather. It's got clouds. It's got lightning. It's got an aurora australoborealis. And the sky is blue. Well, finally, this year, they put down the charade, and Mars looks like a cross between Arizona and Utah, and this most recent picture that I call Lambert Field on Mars looks like Mexico. So those are the kinds of discoveries that we are intrigued by and that we work up. We improve the NASA photos, which are often what I call dehanced. You know, they're a little too dark or a little skewed, or they'll drop a Kleenex, as I say, they'll drop a piece of Kleenex on something in the background to distract you from the really important things in the foreground. But let's go back to Andrew and talk about his work. Andrew.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, you know, I think a lot about NASA, and a lot of people have opinions about what what is the agenda? How can they not be seeing these things? You know, like I said, when I got involved in it, there had been these other groups like Martian Genesis, Rami over at Exclusive Mars Images, Mars X Files, a bunch of groups that have been doing it for years. They found all these things and had been finding them for years and years and years. So, you know, the question is NASA just on purpose, you know, not disclosing it, or are they just not seeing it? My feeling is more likely that there's another agenda going on, and this is, you know, I think personally they take the images and I think they process the images through some sort of algorithm that automatically removes anything that is, or tries to remove anything that is identifiable as not, you know, as not natural or artificial or a person or whatever it is, or an image.
We all agree.
Yeah.
This is a standard operating procedure. Now, as you said, it's reduced to software and artificial intelligence. But I had one of the early guests on my program was a NASA technician. Her name is Donna Hare. She was one of the whistleblowers back in the early 1990s. She told of her work with NASA processing photographs, lunar photographs, Apollo photographs, that they had to scan through and find all the anomalies, like structures on the moon, UFOs on the moon, landed or flying over the moon. And her job was to airbrush out these images so they could reprocess them and then release them to the public. So this is a well-known ploy. Now let's talk a little bit about why they would do that. Well, my theory, just to get it off my chest, as I get it off my chest almost every week, is that any sign of antecedent life, previous civilizations on the moon or Mars, especially extraterrestrial life, would just cave in the cornerstone, the evolutionary cornerstone of Darwinian science. Once you admit the possibility of another intelligent species, alien species, or alien intervention in the evolution of mankind, the evolutionary theory collapses. And that is certainly one of the cornerstones. The other one, that cornerstone, another cornerstone of Western science is atheism, disbelief in God or any kind of spiritual reality or spiritual intervention in human affairs. But I'll turn it back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, I think also that, as we know, like the government agencies like to compartmentalize, right? So a lot of times people will do their task and not know what's going on down the hall. So there's very possibly part of NASA that is doing this to basically satisfy the taxpayer, because this is taxpayer funded, right? So they have to show something. Meanwhile, there's very likely or possibly, and I think there's a lot of people coming forward and speaking about other programs that are much higher technology, that are much more deeper, let's say deeper into Mars. Like there's a lot more going on in Mars, but for them to, that's a separate program. This is the one that's available to the public, and then there's the other one.
The secret space program. Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other, and to your point though, also, if they were to reveal what's going on with the history of Mars, a lot of things I have found tons of stuff that relate back to, that look Sumerian, that look Egyptian. So as a result of looking at that, if that were to be revealed, then you have to go on our planet and say, what's the connection here, and who's really running things,
Right.
It's very possible that the power structures that were involved in Mars ended up just kind of hopping to Earth and have some sort of influence down here. But that's a little bit.
Well, that's my theory as well. I believe I call them the Martian remnant. It's actually a fact. There was a solar system cataclysm, several of them. One of them is the formation of the moon when the Earth was struck by a hypothetical planetoid called Theia. It gouged out the Pacific Ocean basin and then carried off a huge amount of water and Earth materials into outer space, combined it with its own debris, and coagulated and became what we call the moon. The other part is the asteroid belt, is evidence of a solar cataclysm between Mars and Jupiter. There was another planet, a huge planet that has left the asteroid belt, to which the Anunnaki referred as the hard bracelet. And they counted planet Earth as seventh planet because apparently when they came into the solar system, they started counting planets from Pluto down. And so instead of us being the third planet from the sun to the Anunnaki, we were the seventh planet to the sun. And so my theory, and that of several others, is that the Anunnaki established a base, a colony on Mars when Mars was a vibrant, living ecosystem. But they got into a war, and the war was a nuclear holocaust that spread Xenon-29 all over Mars. And this is how Dr. John Brandenburg, who wrote Death on Mars, came to the conclusion, because Xenon-29 is an isotope. It does not happen naturally. It's not a natural formation. It only produced in nuclear explosions. And since they found it all over Mars, he came to the conclusion that Mars was devastated in a nuclear holocaust. So I believe that the survivors, which I call the Martian remnant, some of them made it to Earth, and they became the gods, the ancient gods, the Anunnaki, the Egyptian gods, the Olympians of the Greco-Roman civilization, or their theogony. Back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, my feeling about, as I think about Mars and the things I've found, there's a lot of elongated skulls, right? So So we have elongated skulls on this planet, on Earth, and Brian Forster and people like that have done a lot of work with the Paracas skulls. They did the DNA test. The DNA tests actually refer back to the Caucasus region, and there was this mythology of a race from Mars coming down and landing on the planet in the Caucasus region.
Yeah, now when we're talking about the Caucasus, we're talking about Ukraine, southern Russia,
Right.
northern Iran. It's the cradle of civilization.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And but I think that Mars has had several periods of life, and I think there's one that's extremely ancient, millions of years ago, and then I think there might be one that's a little bit more recent. Maybe, who knows, maybe within the last 500,000, but
I believe there may be life on Mars today, but living underground.
Underground.
The water retreated. About 10 years ago, one of our Martian probes overflying the planet, doing radar soundings, they claimed they had found a frozen sea under the surface of Mars. Imagine a frozen lake covered with red dust. But they said that it was 125 miles long and about 2 miles deep. That's a hell of a lot of water. So frozen water is submarinian. On Earth, because we call the planet Terra, we call it subterranean. But on Mars, the underground is called marine. The ground is called marine, and so it'd be submarinian. And I believe that there is a lot of water. I have found a lot of evidence of running water on the surface. I have found actual photographs of ripples. I actually found NASA released about, 2014. I happened to be watching the NASA channel, and they were showing these beautiful photos of tidal pools on Mars. And I grabbed the videotape and I threw it in. And I just in time to catch about 3 or 4 seconds of a pan that showed a beach on Mars with waves rolling in. But the remarkable thing was that the waves were not propagating at a speed or an amplitude like we're used to on waves on Earth. They were rolling in a little more slowly and less high, like a slow motion wave, and then they cut it out, but I was able to capture that. And I broke that story on George Noory's Coast to Coast with stills. I didn't have the ability to reproduce or capture the video, but I was able to shoot stills off my screen to show what I say facetiously, Morningstar Beach on Mars. I found out that in the Virgin Islands, my friend kept going to the Virgin Islands. Hey, do you know that there's a place down there they call Morningstar Beach? I have yet to see it. I hope to do someday. But anyway, we are the ones who are uncovering the real mysteries of Mars. They are tight-lipped. The NASA workers, they work under duress, non-disclosure agreements, oaths of secrecy. But there are a lot of good guys in NASA that every once in a while they throw a picture out. Oops, I didn't see that, that kind of thing. Right. And there are some that leak out the information directly. But you have a remarkable eye, so I'm sure that you really loved geometry when you were in school, because that's the key. I think geometry is the key to understanding and being able to see things that other people can't see. Would you like to tell us about some of your more interesting discoveries, what you consider to be some of your best?
Sure.
Do you want to share screen? If you want to, you can do it now.
Yeah, you want to do that? I can do that.
In the meantime, I'll show a couple. Well, I'll wait for you because I like to tease the people to talk about it. That's the beauty of radio. It lets people understand.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. And I see
the
gentleman with the conch helmet. As a matter of fact, we were discussing a figure like that our friend Ron Gibran found on a cliff on Mars. He was likening it to the heads of Pacal, the Aztecs, who had very interesting armor.
Right. So what I did is I knew you were going to ask me this. So I have about 300 finds over the last 16 months. I went through them very quickly yesterday and took about 30 or 40 and threw them into another file. So this is another file, which I think have, some pretty interesting stuff. So this one, I mean, it's very likely not to be specifically Enki, the Anunnaki. However, if you look at, and I don't know if you see my cursor, but
yes, I see it. Yes.
Okay. So you see, I mean, it's pretty amazing. When I saw this,
it looks sculpted.
Yeah, I mean, you have the layers just like that's on the classic Sumerian. There's something on the top, and then you go here, and there's this third eye, which is just like here.
Yes.
So, and I think this is fairly large too.
Let's tell the audience. We're looking at pictures that are similar to Anunnaki bas reliefs, and if you study the Anunnaki sculpture, you'll find that their gods are wearing what really pointed hats, what we associate in males with wizards and in women with witches. They wear witches' hats and wizards' hats. They're conical in form, and sometimes they have an appearance of a conch or a seashell, and that's what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, and if any of the listeners want to check out some of the pictures, they can go to Mars Revealed on Facebook and go to the media. Actually, go to Mars Reveal, click on my name, and then it'll show everything that I've contributed over the last year, and then they can see any of these pictures.
Right. I joined recently, by the way. I didn't know that that it was that, and I started seeing suggested groups. I saw Mars Revealed, like, well, I'll join that one because I'm interested in Mars. So we're now connected there. That's very good.
Excellent. So, all right, let me. All right, do you see this?
Yes, I do.
This one. I mean, other people, everyone's different. Everyone sees things differently. Some people see everything as a rock. Some people see little Martians in every single speck. I'm somewhere in the middle there. I like to have a little bit of a discerning eye. But as far as organic things on Mars,
yes,
this one blew me away because it doesn't look fossilized. It looks like a creature. It looks like something that is literally popping its head out of a crevice with the side of the mountain. He looks like whatever. Looks like he has some sort of banding on the snout. So this is something in my mind, something between a reptile and a bird. There's something on his head. I mean, there's a lot of things.
I'll tell you, if I may, I'll tell you what strikes me, and this is something that very few other people really pay attention to. The shadow being cast by this object, element, entity is perfectly triangular. It's symmetrical.
Right.
Very often, I will find things simply because the shadow of the object is casting, or the shadow that it is not casting and should be casting, tips me off that NASA's played around with the picture.
Right.
But this is a very, very nice, very cute little creature. It's almost.
I had a feeling it was vicious because they had to tie up its snout, so it may be cute, but it probably has like massive fangs or something. I don't know.
Oh, we see different things. Like the Muppets.
I know.
Let's go on. Let's go
on.
I think you can toggle by hitting that arrow.
Yeah, I know, but some of them are. Yeah, I mean, some are better than others. That's fine, though. We can just go quick.
Yeah, could you hold that one? That's a much better enlargement of the thing.
Yeah.
We're discussing. It just got very big.
I'll just go through. Well, actually, let me go back. Let me just go back quickly to the top of the. Just give me 1 second.
Sure. Now, while we're looking at this, do you see that what I call the shadow actually looks like it was an imprint in the ground, as if it laid down and was erected from a horizontal position to a vertical position.
Right. So this one is expanded here. This looks like first you have a flat base, which is, you see a lot of that. But this item here literally looks like some sort of technology. It looks like there's a wire attached to maybe a camera head or a.
Oh, the picture hasn't changed yet. on my screen.
Oh, you don't have it?
Not yet. You may have to reset the share screen. Sometimes that happens. So let's do that. Turn off your share screen, and I'll do my share screen.
All right.
I'll show you some of the things that I've been working on here. Let's see. One of the most interesting photographs. Can you see that one?
Yeah.
This is the one that a lady friend of ours named Georgia Lambert, who works closely with Richard and our crew. You know, she's a very, very interesting, intelligent, mystical lady. She found this photograph, but NASA did a funny thing to it, which is they split it into four pictures. Where the big one, see that? This is one of the typical NASA tricks. They'll split one photograph, or they'll compose a photograph out of four of them, and they'll put a big white cross in them, which kind of, it interferes with the human brain seeing the totality. So what I do is I eliminate the cross. I meld the four pictures together to produce a unified view. This is how, that was the first instance where I removed the horizontal and the vertical axis of the cross. And then you can see up at the top that the upper right is a little darker than the upper left. So then I would work it over and try to even out. You see that one? That's nice, much smoother contour.
Yeah.
And when you do that, what this looks like is the remnants of a road passing over Mars. The rest of it looks like desert. And I said facetiously, the yellow brick road, some of the rocks and the rubble is quite pink, but other is quite yellow and white. And it looks like the road definitely has a direction and then turns around this bluff that is to our right.
Yeah.
Here we're looking at a close-up into the interior of the famous portal, or the door on Mars that they're denying is a door. But what I see here is the outline of a hawk in the crack and also the entrance. So again, this Egyptian and Anunnaki iconography. And if we look deeply into the cave, we see this, looks like Marvin the Martian, his black head with two big eyes and a thin neck. That reminds me of Marvin the Martian, but without the Roman helmet. There we go. This is a very nice image of the whole door, the portal, as they say. And another thing that NASA tries to do to debunk photographs is telling us that this portal, which really looks big enough for a 6-foot-tall man to stand in, they're trying to tell us it's only 24 inches high. There we have a great long shot of the portal. Yeah, so we've been working on this, all of us, this Mars imaging team, for over, I guess, about a month. And we better tell NASA it's not going to go away, because the work is getting better and better, and the enhancements are improving with every passing day. So let me turn off my screen sharing and we'll go back to yours, Andrew.
Okay.
All right, you can turn your screen on, share screen now.
Is that working?
It looks beautiful. Looks like where I grew up. Nice background. Very nice tropical beach with clear water.
I wanted to show you, since we're on that point about, do you see this?
Yes.
Yeah. So I spoke with Andrew Curry, or texted him, or not, emailed him on this. I had come up, and this is very rough, and this is to your point about NASA talking about this being 24 inches. So yes. Someone had discovered this wall over here.
Yes.
And if you look at it, it looks, kind of, somewhat megalithic. And so it very well may even be bigger than this. But I just said, look, it's close. We can actually extrapolate and project the height based on an assumption of the size of the block.
Right.
So if this block here is 6 to 8 inches, then this door is 5 to 6 feet. So it kind of speaks, because this is not a natural formation, I don't believe. These are
Of course not.
right. So unless you have unless these are 2-inch blocks, and in fact, yeah, it would have to be like a 1 to 1.5, I think, inch block height in order for the height of the opening to be, 2 feet. So
Yeah.
anyway, I wanted to point that out. I thought that was.
Well, I did an estimation, calculation based on a slightly different approach. Our friend Keith Laney, who has hiddenmission.com, he's really a great lunar and Mars researcher. He said to me in an email that this was sedimentation and that these layers were 2 inches in thickness. So what I did is I counted the layers from the base of the door to above the lintel stone and came up with 48. So 48 times 2 is 96, and that's 8 feet high.
Right.
So again, now, these are ways that we have
to get there,
debunking NASA. NASA tries to debunk a picture, and then we debunk them by using their own science against them. Now, this interesting thing, this wall that you found on the right side, that looks to me like a trench. And if you look at the floor, it's very smooth, as if a metal sheet is over it. Now, if you go to the Jigapan and follow it up, you can see that that trench goes between two sides, upright walls, and then beyond it, if you turn to the right, there's an entire area that seems to be canopied with that material that we see there on the ground. Okay, we can go on.
Do you see this?
It has not changed yet.
Why does it keep doing that? Let me see.
Well, maybe you can turn it off and turn it on.
All right. Do you see that?
Nope.
No. All right, hold on.
We got the gremlins, the Skype gremlins.
I have to just toggle through. I think I just have to toggle through it.
Yeah, that's the best way to do it.
Right, so that's fine. Do you see that now?
Just to warn you, we have about 2 minutes before the break, but we can get a couple more pictures or another picture in.
Do you see this?
Oh, yes.
So, I know mirroring is a controversial thing, and I tend to never do it.
Mm-hmm.
As far as taking one half and then doubling it, because it's true.
Yes.
You can create any sort of interesting thing, but I don't believe that you automatically do that and come up with a face. So the reason,
right. As I showed you earlier before the show, I was showing you the 4 faces that I derived from the original face. I call it the 5 faces.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. But so
there's encryption. There's a lot of ways to encode things, and geometry is one of them. And I think I broke the code of the face on Mars in 1998 when I split the face and mirrored both sides, and one produced a lion, the other side produced a bearded man with a conical crown. And when I flipped him over without doing anything else, it turned into that eagle. Later on, I did the golden mean, and it turned into an ox or a bull.
Yeah, I mean, George Haas does a lot with that sort of thing as well.
Yes.
Maybe he got it from you. But so the reason I did that, and this is brand new. I just found this like 4 days ago. So it looked to me, if you look at what's going on over here, there's clearly a Photoshop type obscuring going on where someone copy and pasted a bunch of stuff to basically cover up the left half of this object.
I agree. It looks like they intentionally blurred it or smeared it.
Right. So,
but it's a very handsome face, I have to say.
It's
the brow, the cheek, and the nose, and the chin, and the mouth are very clear, and more humanoid than we are used to seeing on Mars.
Yeah, could be right. So I thought,
Andrew, would you hold that thought, please? We're at 3:56, and the break music is going to come on in a few seconds. And folks, you're listening to Revolution Radio in the Morningstar Report. And we ask you for your contributions to help Revolution Radio going. And we'll be back in about 3 minutes with more interesting questions. Bye.